We are sailing through the creation of our community app where users input information related to foods that they like. And this could be anything. It could be books, movies, television shows, school activities, whatever. But it's a user generated database of values, and we have this database full of a bunch of information that the users have inputted, and we want to show that information on this beautiful display screen. So right now, this screen, the values on the screen are hard coded. And by that, I mean that this food name is just typed into the text value of the label. So this screen, no matter what we do to the screen, it's always going to show guacamole. But we want to change that in the code. We want to get the value not from this, what's hard coded here, but we want to get the value from the database. So the first thing we're going to have to do is wire up this display button so that it takes us to the display screen. And of course, that's going to be done with an on event. And that button is called the display button. So we'll just change the ID to display button, and that will set screen to, I believe it's called the display screen. And so that'll take us there. And then we will now wire it up so that instead of getting this hard-coded information, let's get the information from the database. And that requires this, the create record call. And the create record has 3 parameters. We have to, I'm sorry, not the create record call, not at all. It's the read record call. And the read record call, read records, important, that plural, has 3 parameters. We tell it what table we want to read from. Then we have an option of adding filter terms. We're not going to do that. And then we get a callback. And the callback is going to be an array of all the records returned from the read records call. So we're going to just drop the code block inside the on event. Very important that it's inside the on event because we want it to wait for us to click the display button before it reads this. And it defaults in this for loop. We don't want this for loop. So we're going to delete the for loop, and we're just going to have the read records call. And we're going to read record from the foods table. And we are not going to add any filter parameters. So we just leave this blank, and that means it's going to get all the records. So what this does is it calls over to the foods table, and it grabs all the records. And when it gets all the records, it executes this callback function and passes in the records, passes in this variable, which is an array of all the records. So we can see it by saying console.log records, and we're going to see all the records that come back from this call. Let's try it. There we go. So we've got a bunch of objects, 3, 6, 9, 13 objects, and each one of those objects is a record in our database, a row in our database. And the first one is chocolate pie. Excellent. So we know that read records is working, and it's always a good idea to test it at this point so that you know that that call to the database is coming back with what you expect. And now we'll show that to the screen. So this just requires a bunch of setting text and setting a bunch of values. And I believe it's called the name label, food name label. And what do we want to set it to? We're going to set it to records, which is our array of records. And let's just display the first row in our database. So that's going to be index 0 in the records array. And I believe the value is called food name. So now let's see if that's working. We run it, we display, and yes, it is showing the value of the food name in that first database record. So you can see here in the data tab that the first row in the data table is chocolate pie. And so now let's just go back and set all those other values. So we want to set text of the food name and a bunch of others. So let's set the text of the category label. And instead of records.foodname, that's going to be record0.category. And this is going to be description. And this is going to be submitted by. And we will make category label, and I think this is called description label, and I believe this is called submitted by label. Let's see, let's just test it and see if we guessed right. So we reset run and display, and yes, we are getting all the information. Up here, this little tiny number is the likes count. So let's set that. That is also in our database, and it is a column. We have to reset it so that the app stops running so we can code in here, and we click in here. And we'll Command C and copy that, Command V, and let's set the text of that likes count label, I believe it's called. Likes count label, and that's records 0 dot, I believe in our object, we can just check, it's right here. I believe in our object that is called likes count. It is indeed called likes count. So instead of submitted by, we want to change this to likes count, and it's not liking what we're doing right now at all. So instead of submitted by, likes count. So you can see what we're doing is that obviously these are the screen IDs that we're setting the text to, and then these are the values that we're setting in each of those screen IDs. And these values are all coming from this records array, which is this array of 13 objects that was returned from our read records call. And then we're accessing the first item in the array, which is at index 0, and we're accessing the properties of that object in the first item of the array. And we're getting the food name property, the category property, description, all these properties, and we're displaying them to the screen. And the one we haven't displayed yet, which is kind of maybe the most fun, is the set text, but it's not a set text. We're going to set that image, and we're going to set property of the image something. It's called, I think it's called the food underscore image. Let's just check. Let's take a look. We can always obviously come over to the design screen and see what all these screen elements are called. So on the display screen under the design tab, yes, this screen element right here is the food image. And what we're going to do is we're going to set this property. We're going to set the image property of the element called with the ID of food image. And we're going to set this property to the URL of the image we want displayed here. And that URL lives out on the web in Wikimedia Commons. And then so AppLab is smart enough to go to that URL and grab that image and show it on the screen. So we didn't upload this to our AppLab at all. We're just pulling this off of the internet. We're just supplying a URL in that image tag, and it should show the image of our chocolate pie, which is going to be worth the wait, believe me. So record 0 image URL. So we're setting the property of the food image. We got one little mistake here. What property are we setting? We are setting the image property, not the width, not the height, not the text color. We're setting the image property, and we're setting it to the value of the URL stored in our object in the data table under the column image URL for our ID record with an ID of 2, which right now is in the index 0, the first position of our records array. And I'm just stalling to build up the drama because you are going to love this chocolate pie. Ooh, so delicious. So there you go. We're reading records from the data table and displaying them to the screen. Happy coding.